sure that for some of you, as soon as you hear the word sin, shudder. Who needs more guilt in their lives? Others will applaud a series on sin because they believe that the problem with the world today is that they've lost a sense of sin. Still others have images of the old Redemptorist preachers and fear, here's another Redemptorist with hell, fire, and damnation. My experience, however, as a priest for over 40 years and as a psychologist for 35 years, is that people are very aware of sin and their sinfulness in our secular society. No one would deny that we as humans do dastardly things. We damage relationships by our behaviors, and we're in danger of destroying our environment. Most people are very aware that they are sinners, that they mess up, that they do the wrong when they want to do the good. My experience would suggest that people have a harder time seeing their innate goodness than they do their sinfulness. What we need is to become more and more convinced that God sees us as good people who sometimes do bad things, not bad people who sometimes do good. This is the backdrop I'd like to keep in mind as we begin with an overview of what sin might mean for us today. In the subsequent talks in this series, I will look at some of the main weaknesses that assail us as humans. Some of these will be the traditional capital sins, but I will add others that for many are considered capital. There's a restaurant just across the street from St. Patrick's in Toronto called Sin and Redemption. I'm sure there was some tongue-in-cheek in naming a restaurant Sin and Redemption in the shadow of a church. The restaurant name does suggest that most people have some understanding of sin. But the name also points out a fundamental Christian theological truth about sin. We're never abandoned to sin by God. Redemption is always closely linked to sin. Along with sin is always the possibility of grace. Most of us are good people. We get along with others, we're generous to our families and friends, we help out in community when we can, we're faithful to our commitments, we love our partners and our children. We know that what brings us true and lasting happiness are right relationships based on love. Being good isn't something that's imposed on us. It comes out of a deep awareness that this is who we are meant to be as humans. When we fail in our task as humans, when we fail to love as we know we should, we experience what we call sin. Sin is not about breaking rules as much as it is about hurting ourselves and others. Sin is being off-center as good people. Several years ago, I wrote a research paper on guilt. The professor asked me, why would you choose such a topic? I replied, well, as a Catholic, I have lots of experience. Guilt is something we all want to run away from, but guilt also has a positive side for moral behavior. It reminds us that we are called to live good lives. Guilt is not a feeling to be easily dismissed, but a reliable warning that we're confronting something that will jeopardize our happiness. Guilt points out how sin affects the way we interact with others in our world. When we're caught up in sin, we become self-absorbed. Our world shrinks and we isolate ourselves. We're off-centered and lonely. Just think of a time when you were caught up in jealousy. Do you recall how your world became focused on one person, how you were miserable, how your feelings colored every thought and action? Sin enslaved and imprisoned you. We've become so accustomed to thinking of sin as something personal that we forget that sin involves other people. When we take an honest look at sin, we can see that what we do in life makes a difference, that our actions have consequences. A sense of sin recognizes that there's tragedy and horror in our world due to human greed and selfishness. We acknowledge that when we fail, we can make mistakes. We can make bad choices. This is the truth of who we are as human beings. But it's not the whole story. Even in the presence of serious sin, there's always hope for forgiveness and redemption. Sin in our Christian theology will never have the last word. The Christian message is that it is in our human reality that the power of forgiveness resides. Christ comes to sit at our table as we are, bringing us his acceptance and love. An awareness of sin is a gift of the Holy Spirit to help us understand more fully who we are, our world, and the place where the great mystery of redemption takes place. As we begin these reflections on sin, I'm not inviting you onto a guilt trip or a journey of self-pity. This is meant to be a hopeful reflection. What we want is to be faithful in our relationships with God, with one another. We know that this is what will bring us true and lasting happiness.